My wife betrayed me with my cousin. My family abandoned me for 20 years without reason. But when I became a millionaire, they came crawling back, and I discovered they hid my daughter from me. I'm 44 years old. I'm the CEO of a pretty successful hospitality group, and last week I met my 20-year-old daughter for the first time, whose existence I discovered just 2 months ago. I know it sounds completely crazy, and believe me, I'm still processing all of this. But I need to tell this story because what happened to me basically destroyed my life 2 decades ago, and only now am I starting to understand why. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I married Nicole at 22, thinking it was going to be forever. Nicole and I had been dating since high school, that typical teenage love that everyone thinks won't last, but in our case seemed real. We got married as soon as I finished college. I was working in sales for a tech company. Nothing glamorous, but I made decent money, and she worked in an administrative office. We lived in a small apartment, like one of those where you can't even stretch your arms completely in the living room, but we were happy, or so I thought. The first 2 years were good, normal. We had our fights like any young couple, but nothing serious. We hung out with friends, went to my parents' house on Sundays. My cousin and my sister loved Nicole. Everything was as it should be. But then, something changed in the 3rd year. Nicole started acting weird, like distant. She was always tired or had to stay late at work, and when I asked her what was wrong, she just said she was stressed. I tried to be understanding, honestly, because I thought maybe it was work or that we were going through that difficult phase that all couples have, you know what I mean? It never occurred to me that she could be seeing someone else, much less that someone was my cousin, Matthew. Matthew was my uncle's son, the owner of a pretty big family business in the city, and he'd always been the family favorite because his father had money. I'd see him at family gatherings, but we weren't close. He was an arrogant guy who always bragged about his stuff, his new car, his trips, the kind of person who makes you want to leave the room when he starts talking. Anyway, one day, completely out of the blue, Nicole comes home and tells me she wants a divorce. Just like that, without any real explanation, just that she didn't love me anymore and needed to move on with her life. I was paralyzed, literally couldn't process what was happening. I asked her if there was someone else, if I'd done something wrong, if we could try couples therapy, anything. But she just kept repeating that it was over and that she'd already talked to a lawyer. It was devastating. Like the worst moment of my life up to that point. We signed the papers like 2 months later. She kept some stuff from the apartment, and I moved to an even smaller studio on the other side of town. What came next was even worse. My parents, my sister, basically my whole family stopped talking to me. And when I say they stopped talking to me, I mean they cut all contact. Like they blocked me. Everywhere. Didn't answer my calls, my messages, nothing. I didn't understand what was happening, I tried going to my parents' house, and my mother wouldn't even open the door, just yelled from inside for me to leave and not come back. My sister sent me a message saying I was a disgrace to the family and to never speak to her again. It was surreal, like being in a nightmare you can't wake up from. I kept asking myself what the hell I'd done to deserve this, if the divorce had been Nicole's decision, not mine. The next few years were the hardest of my life. I'm not gonna lie. I sank into a really bad depression. Lost my job because I basically couldn't function. I'd stay in bed all day wondering what had happened. My savings evaporated, paying rent and food. I had to sell my car. I got to the point where I was eating instant noodles for dinner every night because it was the only thing I could afford. I had no family. My friends gradually drifted away because I guess they didn't know how to deal with me, and I felt completely alone in the world. There were moments where I honestly don't know how I kept going. Like there were days where I thought it wasn't worth getting out of bed. But eventually, like 2 years after hitting rock bottom, something clicked in my head. I had 2 options, keep sinking or try to climb out of the hole. A couple of friends from college, the only ones who hadn't completely abandoned me, offered to help me start a small business. They had some capital saved, and I had experience in sales and customer service. So we decided to open a small restaurant, like one of those casual food places that aren't fancy at all but have good food at reasonable prices. It was a huge risk, honestly, because I didn't know anything about the restaurant industry beyond having worked as a waiter in college, but I needed something to focus on that wasn't my depression. The first months were chaotic. I worked like 16 hours a day, did everything from cooking to cleaning the bathrooms, whatever was necessary to make the business work. But it worked. I mean, we started having regular customers. The online reviews were good, and after the first year, we were already making enough to think about expanding. We opened a second location like 3 years later, then a third, and I basically became obsessed with work because it was the only thing that made me feel like I had some kind of purpose. I met my current wife. I'll call her Anna, like 6 years after the divorce. She was 35 at the time, worked as a manager at one of our restaurants, and was completely different from Nicole. Anna was direct, honest, made me laugh, and above all, supported me in everything. We got married after 2 years of dating and had our son like a year later. He's 8 now, and he's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Fast forward like 10 more years. My business had grown a lot. It wasn't just restaurants anymore, but we had small hotels, catering services, a whole hospitality group with like 200 employees. I was doing well financially. Like really well. We lived in a nice house in a good neighborhood. My son went to a private school, and I finally felt like I'd left all that dark past behind. Like 3 months ago, I was invited to an interview for a local TV show about successful entrepreneurs in the city. One of those things where they ask you questions about how you started and what advice you have for other entrepreneurs. I said yes because I thought it would be good publicity for the business. And it was a normal interview. I talked about the restaurants, about how I started from scratch with my friends, that kind of thing. 2 weeks after the show aired, I'm in my office working on some financial reports when my assistant calls me on the internal phone and says, "There are some people here who say they're your family and want to see you." I froze, literally felt like the floor was opening up beneath me. I told my assistant to tell them I was busy, but she insisted they were being very insistent and weren't going to leave. I took a deep breath. I don't know why I decided to see them. I guess part of me needed answers after 20 years, and I told her to let them in. My parents and my sister walked into the office, and it was the most uncomfortable thing in my life. My father was like 68 at the time, my mother 66, and my sister in her 42nd. They all looked older, obviously, but what struck me most was the expression on their faces, like between guilt and desperation. My mother started crying immediately, saying, "Daniel, son, we've missed you so much, we need to talk to you." I was sitting behind my desk completely rigid. My hands were shaking, but I was trying to maintain my composure. I asked them what they wanted after 2 decades of ignoring my existence, and that's when they started spilling the whole truth. Turns out Nicole had been cheating on me with Matthew for like 6 months before asking me for a divorce. My sister had discovered it because she saw them together at a cafe on the other side of town, but when she told my parents, they decided not to tell me anything. And you know why? Because my uncle, Matthew's father, basically threatened the whole family. My uncle was a powerful guy in the city, had connections, money, and he told my parents that if I found out and made a scandal, he was going to ruin my father's business, who at the time was still working and depended on some contracts that had indirect relation to my uncle's company. So my parents made the decision to protect Matthew instead of protecting me, their own son. But wait, because it gets worse. My mother, still crying, drops the biggest bomb on me. "Daniel, there's something else you need to know. Nicole was pregnant when she divorced you. You have a daughter. She's 20 now. Lives in another state." I think at that moment my brain just stopped functioning, like I couldn't process the words I was hearing. I asked them how they knew that, and my sister explained that Nicole had married Matthew like 6 months after the divorce. Everyone assumed the baby was Matthew's, but Nicole eventually confessed the truth to Matthew, and he told my uncle, who told my parents under threat that they should never tell me. So, for 20 years, my whole family knew I had a daughter and decided not to tell me anything. They cut me out of their lives because they couldn't deal with the guilt of seeing me and not being able to tell me the truth. Or that's what they said. My father tried to justify it by saying they did it to protect the family, that my uncle was a dangerous man, that they had no choice. I just stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. My sister said they'd seen the interview on TV, that they'd realized how successful I'd become, and that they felt they could finally reach out because my uncle had died like 2 years ago and there was no longer a threat. I asked them if they really thought I was going to forgive them, after what they'd done, and my mother started with the speech about how family is the most important thing, that they'd made mistakes, but they loved me. I got up from my desk and told them to get out of my office immediately. My father tried to approach, but I called security. I watched them leave while my mother screamed for me, please, not to hate them, that they just wanted a chance to meet their grandson, my son, with Anna. That's what ended up infuriating me. You know, the fact that now that I had money and success, they suddenly wanted to be part of my life, wanted to meet my son. After abandoning me at my worst moment, the next few weeks were an emotional chaos. My parents and my sister wouldn't stop trying to contact me. They sent emails, messages, even went to my house, but Anna closed the door in their faces. My son asked me who those older people were who had come, and I didn't know what to tell him. So I just said they were acquaintances from the past who weren't important. But what really had me obsessed was the fact that I had a daughter, a 20-year-old daughter I didn't know existed. Anna and I talked a lot about what to do. She completely supported me in whatever I decided. But she made me see that this wasn't just my decision, that there was a 20-year-old girl who deserved to know the truth if she didn't already know it. After like 2 weeks of not being able to sleep thinking about this, I made the decision to look for my daughter. My sister, in one of her multiple contact attempts, had sent me the girl's full name and the city where she lived. I found her on Instagram. She had her profile public, and when I saw her photos for the first time, I almost started crying right there. She looked so much like me, it was impossible to deny she was my daughter. She had my eyes, my nose, even the way she smiled was the same. I sent her a direct message explaining who I was, that I'd recently found out about her existence, and that I'd like to meet her if she was open to it. I made it clear I didn't expect anything from her, that I understood if she didn't want to know anything about me, but that I felt she had a right to know the truth. 2 weeks passed without a response, and I'd already lost hope. I thought maybe Nicole had put ideas in her head about me, or that she simply wasn't interested in meeting me. But then, on a Tuesday night, I received a long message from her. She told me she'd suspected all her life that Matthew wasn't her biological father because she didn't look like him at all, that Nicole had always been evasive when she asked about her birth, and that when she saw my message and looked up photos of me on the internet, she knew immediately it was true. She told me she was angry with Nicole, that she felt they'd robbed her of the opportunity to meet me, but yes, that she'd like us to talk. We started talking through messages and then video calls almost every day. She told me about her life, that she was in college studying graphic design, that her relationship with Nicole and Matthew had always been complicated, that she felt like she'd never fit into that family. I told her my version of the story, what happened with the divorce, how my family had abandoned me, everything. She believed me, told me that many things were starting to make sense now, like the fact that Matthew had always treated her differently than the other 2 children he and Nicole had later. Like 3 weeks ago, I flew with Anna and my son to the state where she lives to meet her in person. It was the most surreal experience of my life, sitting in a cafe across from this 20-year-old woman who's my daughter, watching how she interacted with my son, her 8-year-old half-brother. They got along amazing from the first moment. Like my son was fascinated to have an older sister, and she was super patient with him. We spent the whole weekend together, went to dinner, to the movies, just spending time getting to know each other. When it was time to say goodbye at the airport, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for looking for me, Dad." I think at that moment I released like 20 years of accumulated pain. I'm not gonna lie, I cried like a baby right there in the middle of the airport. Since then, we've been in constant contact. She decided to distance herself from Nicole and Matthew, told them she knew the truth and was furious with them for lying to her all her life. Nicole tried to contact me like 2 weeks ago, sending me messages saying we needed to talk about our daughter, but I blocked her everywhere. I have nothing to talk to her about, like absolutely nothing. My daughter is an adult now. She can make her own decisions about who she wants to have a relationship with. As for my parents and my sister, I haven't talked to them again either. I still get occasional messages, but I ignore them all. There are things that simply can't be forgiven, you know? And abandoning your son at his worst moment to protect the cousin who destroyed his life is definitely one of those things. My daughter is coming to visit us next month. She's going to stay 2 weeks with us. Anna is excited. She's been planning all kinds of activities to do together, and my son won't stop asking when his sister is arriving. I'm still processing all this, honestly. There are days where I have a hard time believing I really have a daughter and that after 20 years she's finally in my life. I'm still angry with all the people who lied to me and betrayed me. I guess that will never completely go away. But I also feel something like peace for the first time in a long time. I have a family that truly loves me, a successful business I built with my own effort, and now I have my daughter back in my life. It's not the perfect movie ending, but it's enough for now.